back to Macro Money. This is your host, Will, and your other host, Jacob.
On today's show, we'll be talking about the open economy and economic growth.
First off, we'll talk about the balance of trade, which is the difference in value between a country's imports and exports.
Good looks, Will. Thank you for that. Now we'll talk about the current account. The current account is the difference between a nation's savings and its investment. The current account is an important indicator about the economy's health. It is defined as the sum of the balance of trade, net income from abroad, and net current transfers. Positive current account balance indicates that the nation is a net lender to the rest of the world, while negative current account balance indicates that it is a net borrower from the rest of the world. A current account surplus increases a nation's net foreign assets by the amount of the surplus, and a current account deficit decreases it by that amount. The current account is one of the two main components of a nation's balance of payments. Will tell us about the other main component.
Thanks, Jacob. The other main component of a nation's balance of payments is the financial account. A country's financial account is broken down into two sub-accounts, which are the domestic ownership of foreign assets and the foreign ownership of domestic assets. If the domestic ownership of foreign assets increases, it increases the overall financial account. The financial account will decrease if the foreign ownership of domestic assets increases. Together, a country's ownership of foreign assets and the foreign ownership of a country's assets make up the financial account.
Stellar job, Will. Glad we could inform the listeners who might be a little rusty on the subject. Now we'll introduce you to Mohammed and Yassine to talk to us about the current state of the Egyptian open economy.
Salam, nice to be here.
Hello, my name is Mohammed and I am very pleased to be here.
Yassine, can you tell us about the balance of payments account in Egypt?
Thank you, Will. As of March 2016, Egypt's balance of trade was negative $3.019 billion. A deficit is seen here because Egypt's imports are greater than its exports. In 2016, Egypt exported $1.667 billion and imported $4.665 billion.
Okay, next, could you talk to us about the current account status in Egypt?
Of course, the current account is an important indicator about the economy's health. It is defined as the sum of balances of trade, net income from abroad, and net current transfers. Egypt recorded a current account deficit of $4.94 billion in the fourth quarter of 2015.
And what about the financial account? Could you give us a little insight on that?
Yes. The major components of a financial account are direct investments, portfolio investments, other investments, reserve assets. As of 2016, Egypt's financial assets is $3.9 billion deficit. This is because there are more people who own their Egyptian domestic assets than Egypt owning their domestic assets.
And finally, could you tell us about Egypt's exports, imports, and the financial capital flow?
Private capital flow in total percent of GDP last year was measured at 4.16% in 2016, according to the World Bank. Private flows consist of net foreign direct investment and portfolio investment. In 2015, Egypt exported $36.4 billion and imported $69.5 billion, resulting in a negative trade balance. In 2015, the GDP of Egypt was $271 billion in total, and GDP per capita was 11.1K. The top exports of Egypt are crude petroleum, petroleum gas, refined petroleum, nitrous fertilizers. Its top imports refined petroleum, wheat, crude petroleum, petroleum gas, and corn. The top export destinations of Egypt are Italy, India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Germany. The top imports origins are China, United States, Italy, Germany, and Turkey.
Now, Mohammed, can you fill us in on the demand and supply of Egyptian foreign exchange and the exchange rate determinations?
Well, you see here, Will, the law of demand says that the demand for a good falls as the price rises and goes up as the price falls, according to macroeconomics expert Steve Dodge. Supply is simply the amount of goods owners or producers offer for sale. The law of supply says that the quantity of a good supplied rises as the market prices rises and falls as the price falls. In other words, price and supply are directly related. If price goes up, supply will increase. If price goes down, supply will decrease, also according to macroeconomics expert Steve Dodge. Just like the value of a good is determined by the supply and demand for that good, the value of a nation's currency is determined by the supply and demand for that currency. Generally, exchange rates vary as demand for goods from nations vary. See, let me put it like this. What would you do if you could buy your school books at a lower price from a supplier in Egypt than in the United States? You would probably go online and order the books from the Egyptian company and save money. But before you can buy your school books from the Egyptian supplier, you'll have to exchange your money for the Egyptian pound. Even if they accept US dollars, the seller from Egypt ultimately wants to be paid in Egyptian pounds. So eventually, the money will get exchanged. The better deal creates higher demand for Egyptian currency. For Americans, Egyptian goods are less expensive when the pound is cheaper and the dollar is stronger. Assuming there is only trade between the US and Egypt, when the value of the Egyptian pound goes down, Americans will switch from American-made goods to Egyptian-made goods. But before we can purchase goods made in Egypt, we have to exchange dollars for Egyptian pounds. Consequently, an increased demand for Egyptian goods is simultaneously an increase in the quantity of Egyptian pounds demanded. In other words, when the price of Egyptian pounds goes down, demand for Egyptian pound goes up.
And what about the demand curve, Mohammed?
The demand curve for Egyptian pounds in terms of the US dollar is a normal downward sloping demand curve. This is because if the value of the Egyptian pound went down relative to the US dollar, the quantity of Egyptian pounds demanded by Americans would increase.
And the supply curve?
The supply curve for Egyptian pounds in terms of the US dollar is a normal upward sloping supply curve. If the value of the US dollar went down, people from Egypt would want to buy more of our goods. Their demand for the US dollar would go up, so they would supply or exchange more of their Egyptian pounds for US dollars. Thus, the supply of Egyptian pounds on the international market increases.
Mohammed, could you give us a quick summary of your points you made?
Okay, to summarize, as more American goods are demanded, this causes a simultaneous increase in the supply of Egyptian pounds to purchase those goods. Think of it like this. You have all the US dollars in the world. The only way for someone from Egypt to convert their pounds into dollars is to come to you and trade. So you end up with more Egyptian pounds than you had before. Effectively, the decrease in the value of the dollar has created a higher supply of pounds. From the perspective of the Egyptians, the supply curve of the Egyptian pound is really the demand curve of the US dollar.
Wow. Incredible. Thank you, Mohammed. We'll be right back with two American CEOs, Izzy Tedites and Sam Chandler.
Welcome back. Here on Macro Money, we will now be talking about the economic growth, of which is an increase in the amount of goods and services produced per head of the population over a period of time.
Now we'll be welcoming in Izzy and Sam, who are CEOs of the Widget Company and are having a major economic growth in their company. So guys, how have you been so successful lately?
Well, there are four major determinants of economic growth, which are human resources, technology, natural resources, and capital goods. We have seen improvements in all of these, and it has helped to stimulate our economic growth.
I see. And what have you done to improve these determinants?
We have recently started a new training program that educates our workers on how to make widgets more efficiently, which is an improvement in our human resources and an investment in our human capital.
And we have increased the number of machines we have, plus upgraded old technology, which has improved our technology and capital goods, which is an investment in our physical capital.
Finally, there was a decrease in price of oil, which has allowed us to run our machines cheaper which lowered our input costs, which is also investment in our physical capital.
So how have government policies helped you gain economic growth?
The right amount of government intervention, political stability, and enforcing property rights have helped us enforce the economic growth in our company.
Thank you. Very interesting.
All right. Thank you for listening to us today, and we'll see you again never.